Among Middle-earth's vast mythology, two beings stand as perfect opposites. Sauron, whose will to dominate corrupted kingdoms and forged the One Ring. Tom Bombadil, who dances through ancient forests untouched by darkness or time. Their paths were never meant to cross, yet in their contrast lies the heart of Tolkien's world. This tale imagines the impossible. What would happen if Sauron, master of deception and conquest, confronted the one being whose very existence defies his understanding of power? A meeting where malice faces merriment, where domination meets a force that cannot be dominated. Before he became the shadow of Middle-earth, he was Myron, meaning the admirable. He was a Maya with remarkable talent and vision. Among the followers of Aule the Smith, none showed greater promise in craft and design. While others reveled in freedom and spontaneity, Myron sought precision, order, and control. His brilliance was matched only by his growing ambition. The malice sown by Morgoth resonated with something deep within Myron's spirit. The first Dark Lord promised what Aule could not merely to create within the world, but to reshape it entirely. What began as admiration became allegiance, and Myron abandoned his former master. He took on a new name, Sauron, the lieutenant of Morgoth. Throughout the First Age, Sauron commanded Morgoth's armies with relentless efficiency. From the dark stronghold of Angband, he commanded Morgoth's hosts across Beleriand, crushing resistance and spreading corruption. Under his guidance, werewolves and vampires stalked the night, and captive elves were twisted into the first orcs. His influence spread like a plague, dimming the light wherever it touched. When Morgoth was finally defeated in the War of Wrath, Sauron did not share his master's fate. As the Valar's armies tore Angband stone from stone, he slipped away into the eastern lands. Eönwë, the herald of Manwë, demanded his surrender. He promised judgment along with a chance for redemption. For a moment, perhaps, Sauron considered it. But pride and fear prevailed. He would not kneel before those who had once been his equals. For centuries, he hid, gathering strength in the forgotten corners of the world. The world believed the darkness had passed, but he merely waited. When he finally emerged in the Second Age, it was not with sword or flame, but with gifts and promises. Taking on a fair form, he named himself Anatar, Lord of Gifts, and approached the elven smiths of Eregion. These craftsmen, led by Celebrimbor, Bor, the grandson of Feanor, welcomed his knowledge. Together they forged wonders, chief among them the Rings of Power, 9 for mortal kings, 7 for dwarf lords in their halls of stone, and 3 for the elven kings. But Sauron's true masterpiece was forged in secret. In the fires of Mount Doom, he forged the One Ring, a vessel for his power and will designed to control all other rings. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. When he placed it upon his finger, the elves immediately sensed his treachery and removed their rings. Enraged, Sauron unleashed war upon Eregion, destroying the realm and capturing Celebrimbor, who was tortured and killed. The 7 and 9 fell into Sauron's possession. The dwarf lords resisted his control, driven instead by greed and madness, inflaming their desire for gold. But the 9 corrupted mortal kings completely, transforming them into the Nazgûl, their souls devoured by the ring. As darkness spread across Middle-earth, the kingdom of Númenor, greatest realm of men, sent its armies against Mordor. Realizing he could not defeat them in open war, Sauron feigned submission. Taken as prisoner to the island kingdom, he slowly corrupted King Ar-Pharazôn with whispers of power and immortality. Under Sauron's influence, Númenor turned from the Valar to the worship of Morgoth. Great temples were raised, and sacrificial fires burned in the name of the dark. Finally, Sauron convinced the king to launch an assault on the Undying Lands, an act of such hubris that it brought divine retribution. Numenor was swallowed by the sea, its civilization erased from the world. Yet even this catastrophe did not end Sauron's schemes. Though his physical form perished in the destruction, his spirit, bound to the One Ring, survived. He returned to Mordor, rebuilt his fortress of Barad-dûr, and gathered new armies. No longer able to assume a fair form, he became a figure of terror and malice. In time, the free peoples of Middle-earth united against him. The last alliance of elves and men waged a brutal war, and after 7 long years, they besieged Mordor until Sauron himself entered the battle. Gil-galad and Elendil fell before his might, but Isildur, son of Elendil, cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand with his father's broken sword. The Dark Lord's form was destroyed, and his armies scattered. Yet Isildur failed where it mattered most. He claimed the ring instead of destroying it. Though diminished to a shadow, the Dark Lord's essence remained tied to Middle-earth through his greatest creation. For 1,000 years, Sauron slowly regained strength. He established himself in Dol Guldur as the necromancer, breeding new armies while searching for his lost ring. When the White Council finally moved against him, he retreated to Mordor, rebuilding Barad-dûr and manifesting as a lidless eye of flame atop his dark tower. The ring, meanwhile, passed from hand to hand, from Isildur to the riverbed, from the creature Gollum to the hobbit Bilbo Baggins, and finally to Frodo. As the War of the Ring unfolded, Sauron poured his will into recovering the ring, his last and greatest hope. But the weapon he forged proved his undoing. When the ring was finally cast into the fires of Mount Doom, Sauron's power was unmade. The Tower of Barad-dûr collapsed, and the Eye of Sauron vanished from the sky. Unlike Morgoth before him, Sauron was not banished beyond the world. Instead, his spirit was scattered like ash on the wind, present but powerless, unable to take form or influence. The age of Sauron had ended, but the scars he left upon Middle-earth would never fully heal. The might of Sauron extended far beyond mere physical strength, though even in bodily form he towered over the greatest warriors of elves and men. As a Maya spirit, his true power lay in his ability to influence, corrupt, and dominate lesser wills. Foremost among his abilities was the power of transformation. In his original form, Sauron appeared fair and wise, a reflection of his early service to Aule. During the First Age, he could take the shape of a terrible wolf or a great serpent when battle required. Most cunningly, as Anatar, he assumed a beautiful appearance to deceive the elven smiths of Eregion. Only after the destruction of Numenor did he lose this ability, forced to manifest as a figure of dread, or, in his final incarnation, as the lidless eye. Sauron's skill in craftsmanship approached that of his former master. The rings of power represented his greatest work, objects that could preserve and enhance their bearers while secretly binding them to his will. The creation of the One Ring represented the pinnacle of his dark arts, as he poured much of his native strength into this vessel, gaining tremendous power while also creating his greatest vulnerability. The Dark Lord commanded vast knowledge of sorcery. He could summon and control creatures of shadow, raise storms, and send forth darkness to blot out sun and stars. At Dol Guldur and Barad-dûr, he created enchantments so powerful that merely approaching these fortresses filled enemies with dread and confusion. Perhaps most dangerous was Sauron's gift for domination. Through the ring, he could perceive the thoughts of those who wore the lesser rings and bend them to his purpose. Even without direct contact, his will extended across Middle-earth, influencing the weak-minded and instilling fear in the strong. The Nazgûl represented the ultimate expression of this power. Once proud kings reduced to eternal servants, extensions of Sauron's will. His presence alone could corrupt landscapes. Under his shadow, fertile lands became barren, clear waters turned foul, and ancient forests twisted into places of terror. Mordor itself reflected his malice, a once verdant region transformed into a wasteland of ash and stone. Even in defeat, Sauron's power lingered. Long after his physical form was destroyed, creatures born of his corruption, orcs, trolls, and fell beasts, continued to plague the world. Places where his influence had been strongest remained tainted for generations, resistant to healing. Most insidious of all was Sauron's understanding of mortal weaknesses. He knew precisely how to exploit pride, fear, greed, and the desire for power. Even the wisest could be corrupted by his whispers, as the fall of Númenor proved. This psychological mastery made him far more dangerous than any weapon forged of steel or sorcery, for against the darkness within, even the noblest heart could falter. In the ancient forests east of the Shire dwells perhaps the most mysterious being in all of Middle-earth, Tom Bombadil. Even among the realm's many wonders, he stands apart, defying categorization and understanding. The elves know him as Iarwain Ben-Adar, oldest and fatherless, while the dwarves call him Fawn, and men have named him Orold. Yet to himself, he is simply Tom Bombadil, master of his domain and husband to the fair Goldberry. Tom's origins lie shrouded in mystery deeper than the mists of the old forest he calls home. When Elrond names him older than the old, at the council in Rivendell, it is no mere poetic flourish. Tom was present before the first elves awakened beneath the stars, before the counting of years began. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the Barrow-wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. Unlike the Valar or Maiar who came into Arda with purpose, Tom seems to have simply been as though he emerged from the substance of Middle-earth itself. He is neither elf nor man, neither dwarf nor hobbit. Though some have speculated he might be a Maiar like Gandalf or Sauron, this theory fails to capture his essence. Tom exists outside the hierarchies and struggles that define other beings, connected instead to something more fundamental, the world's own rhythm and song. The realm Tom inhabits reflects his nature. The old forest, with its ancient, often malevolent trees, represents one of the last remnants of the great forests that once covered much of Middle-earth. Within its boundaries lurk Old Man Willow, a tree whose malice has grown over countless years, and the Barrow-wights, evil spirits haunting the tombs of forgotten kings. Yet here, Tom walks without fear, singing his nonsensical songs that somehow command absolute authority. His relationship with the forest is not one of dominion, but of harmony. The trees may bend their branches at his command, but he does not seek to shape or control them beyond their nature. Tom simply is, and in his presence, all things become more truly themselves. His songs, which seem random and foolish to mortal ears, contain ancient power, perhaps of the Ainulin Dale, the music of the Ainur that shaped creation itself. In his humble cottage, Tom lives with Goldberry, the river woman's daughter, a being as mysterious as himself, though gentler in aspect. Their home stands as an island of perfect peace in a darkening world, a place where time seems to flow differently, where meals are always plentiful, and where weary travelers find rest untainted by fear. Their relationship embodies a balance rarely seen elsewhere in Middle-earth, between water and earth, between change and permanence, between joy and wisdom. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of Tom's nature comes during his brief encounter with the One Ring. When Frodo reluctantly hands the ring to Tom, something unprecedented occurs. Tom examines it casually, even slips it on his finger with no effect, then makes it disappear with a simple trick before returning it. The ring, which corrupts all other beings, which even the wise fear to touch, holds no power over him. As Gandalf later explains, "Say rather that the ring has no power over him. He is his own master, but he cannot alter the ring itself, nor break its power over others. And now he is withdrawn into a little land, within bounds that he has set, though none can see them, waiting perhaps for a change of days, and he will not step beyond them." The very concepts of possession and power that make the ring so dangerous hold no meaning for Tom, who desires nothing beyond what he already has and controls nothing beyond his own songs. Tom cannot be corrupted, but neither can he be relied upon to defend the world against evil. When the Council of Elrond considers giving the ring to Tom for safekeeping, Gandalf dismisses the idea. Not because Tom couldn't be trusted, but because he might simply forget about it, regarding even the fate of the world as ultimately not his concern. In this way, Tom Bombadil stands as a curious contradiction in Tolkien's legendarium. He exists within a world defined by struggle between good and evil, yet remains untouched by either. He commands power beyond measure, yet exercises it only within his narrow boundaries. He remembers the beginning of all things, yet lives entirely in the present moment. Some scholars of Tolkien's work suggest that Tom represents something more philosophical, a personification of nature itself, or perhaps the spirit of the English countryside that Tolkien saw vanishing in his lifetime. Others see him as a deliberate enigma, a reminder that in any mythology there must remain mysteries beyond understanding. Tom Bombadil and Sauron embody fundamentally contradictory aspects of existence, one content with being, the other consumed by the need to dominate. Under a canopy of ancient trees, at the borders of the old forest where Tom's authority holds firm, Sauron might approach with calculated grace rather than hostility. He would appear in his fairest guise, not the armored Dark Lord, but Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, whose beauty once deceived even the wisest elves. His words would flow like honey, reasonable and measured, addressing Bombadil with the respect due to one who has witnessed the dawn of creation. Sauron would speak of order, preservation, and strength, a vision where the endless cycles of destruction might be halted by firm guidance. He would suggest that even the wise, Galadriel with her ring, Elrond with his haven, Gandalf with his subtle manipulations, recognize the need for power to be wielded. Why then should one as ancient as Bombadil stand apart from the great work of restoration? Tom's response would confound the Dark Lord utterly. Perhaps he would merely smile, plucking a wildflower to examine while Sauron spoke of empires. Or he might break into seemingly nonsensical verse, a rhyme about badgers and butterflies that somehow undercuts Sauron's grand rhetoric without directly opposing it. To Bombadil, the rise and fall of powers is as natural and unremarkable as seasons changing. He sees Sauron not as evil incarnate, but as another ripple in the river of time, significant to those caught in its current, but ultimately transient. The Dark Lord's ambitions are neither to be feared nor fought, but simply observed with the detached interest one might show a thunderstorm passing overhead. Sauron, accustomed to inspiring either terror or servitude, would find himself increasingly unsettled by Bombadil's indifference. His proposals of alliance would meet neither acceptance nor rejection, but something worse, irrelevance. When persuasion failed, he might resort to veiled threats, speaking of the fate awaiting those who stood apart from his new order. Yet, threats hold no weight in Bombadil's realm. Within these boundaries, even malice must bow to his simple commands. Sauron would discover his words losing power, his presence diminishing not through any opposing magic, but through sheer insignificance in the face of Bombadil's ancient simplicity. The meeting would end not with victory declared, but with fundamental incomprehension. Sauron would depart, disturbed by an encounter he could neither classify nor control. a being who represented an approach to existence entirely outside his framework of domination and resistance. Bombadil would return to his flowers and songs, the conversation already fading from his thoughts like morning mist. This strange non-confrontation would stand as a moment where the essence of will to power met its perfect counterpoint, not in opposition, but in complete disinterest. The Dark Lord, who sought to be the center of all things, would face one who had no center to be moved, no ambition to be twisted, no fear to be exploited. And in that meeting, the limits of Sauron's power would be revealed not through defeat, but through irrelevance. Should Sauron attempt more direct methods against the master of the Old Forest, the outcomes would prove equally perplexing to the Dark Lord. If armies of orcs marched beneath the ancient trees with orders to subjugate Bombadil's domain, they would find themselves hopelessly lost, their weapons entangled in suddenly animated vines, their paths leading in circles. The forest itself might rise against them. Old Man Willow would swallow squadrons whole, and the Barrow-wights, ancient spirits predating even Sauron's corruption, might turn against their presumed master. Bombadil would not pursue the retreating forces, nor would he establish defenses beyond his borders. His protection extends precisely as far as his interest does, to the boundaries of his small kingdom and not one step beyond. If by some twist of fate the One Ring remained in Bombadil's keeping, as it briefly did during Frodo's journey, it would represent the ultimate frustration of Sauron's designs. In Tom's hands, the ring would be nothing more than a curious bauble, its whispers of power falling on deaf ears, its corrupting influence finding no purchase in a being who desires nothing beyond what he already possesses. As Gandalf wisely observed at the Council of Elrond, Tom might place the ring on a shelf and forget where he put it, not from carelessness but from complete disinterest in its promises. Even if Sauron brought Mordor's full might, Nazgul and Ring included, to destroy this anomaly in his perfect order, he'd find an opponent impossible to defeat simply because Tom refuses to fight at all. Bombadil's power is not measured against Sauron's, it exists in a different dimension entirely. Where the Dark Lord's strength manifests in domination, Bombadil's manifests in immunity to being dominated. Perhaps the most telling scenario would unfold if the unthinkable occurred. If Sauron conquered all of Middle-earth, if darkness covered every land and every will bowed before him. Then, as Gandalf suggested, Tom Bombadil would be the last light to be extinguished. Not because he would resist with greater force, but because he would continue singing his songs, tending his garden, and walking his forest paths as though nothing had changed. In the end, even Sauron's complete victory would prove incomplete as long as this one being remained who did not acknowledge his supremacy, not through defiance, but through simple, unalterable indifference.